Gridiron Genius, a masterclass in winning championships and building dynasties in the NFL, written by Michael Lombardi, who has been alongside folks like Bill Walsh, Bill Belichick, Al Davis, among others, and Belichick, who wrote the foreword of the book for the author, who is here in studio. Michael Lombardi, good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
How long did it take for Belichick to write the foreword after you asked for it to come back?
It probably took about a week.
That's it, huh?
Yeah, it was in the off season. I asked him before I started writing the book. He said he would do it, and then I didn't ask him until about a couple weeks after the Super Bowl. He wrote it for me.
So he did his job.
He did his job. Okay. When he was asked, his trusty Mac computer, he has it, and he typed it out and sent it to me. It was great. I really appreciate it. It was tremendous for him to do that for me. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, and you were alongside him and Walsh and Al, and I want to get into some of the stories that's inside Gridiron Genius. But I want to also hit you on a couple of topics that I just already started the show with right now. The idea of starting a rookie first-round quarterback. I know it's obviously a lot of gray areas to whether somebody's ready or not, whether they should be put in or not. It's just a yes or no question in our poll question. I think yes. What do you say to that?
Well, I think, look, the word ready is always interesting because were you ever ready to buy your first house? The answer was no, but you bought it anyway, right? And so when you draft a quarterback that high, you have to have a plan for him. Bill Walsh would always talk about the plan for the player you draft, whether it's the quarterback, the running back. What is the plan? And I think that when you draft a quarterback that early, you have to have a plan for him, and you need him to play right away. Those reps are important. And this is another Walshism, is he would rather play a rookie in September and lose games because he knew in December that rookie would be much better and he would win games when it counted the most. I think we're at a point in the NFL because of the new rules and the way we can't really train players. You know, when you first started covering the league and I first got in the league, there were 2-a-day practices and training camp was grueling and it was a 6-week endeavor. Now it's like an in-season schedule basically. So there's not enough time. So September is still a little bit of the preseason. You're still trying to get your way out. Look, the Rams haven't played Jared Goff yet. Oakland, Los Angeles, the Raiders, very little with David Carr. Now maybe week 3 they will. Brady played a whole half last week. Russell Wilson played a whole half. Everybody's managing their team differently. No right or wrong answer, but your team really won't come into full force until the end of September. And I think that's why you need to play these young guys in September.
So the answer is generally yes.
I would say yes. I mean, I think unless the game's way too big. Now, look, the head coach has a tough job. He's got to stand in front of his team and say, here's our quarterback, and he gives us the best chance to win. And if the guy hasn't demonstrated any of those skills during practice, you can't do it. But I think what you see from Josh Allen, what you see from Sam Darnold are enough where the head coach can stand in front of his team and not lose any credibility and say, this is our guy. And then we're going forward. Now, look, quarterbacks are like baseball stadiums. You got to build your team around them. And so once you make Josh Allen the starter, now you tailor that offense around what he can do and what he can't do. Once you name Sam Darnold, the starter, you tailor the offense around what he can and can't do. And now all of a sudden you're headed in the right direction. And I think that's really what needs to happen.
What do you think's going on in Cleveland? We had Jeff Schwartz on last week, and I really enjoy his burgeoning voice in our business.
Right.
8 years in the league, playing offensive line. He says he doesn't understand why Mayfield doesn't get time with the ones. I mean, how
I don't
how
either.
Is that?
I don't either. They're 1-31 over the last 2 years. Look, if they get 6 wins, it's going to be a lot of Bud Light, and it's going to be historic, right? So,
dilly.
And so I think that to me, the quicker they get on with it. Now, I think that the dilemma here is John Dorsey didn't hire Hugh, so Hugh's an inherited head coach there. So there's a little bit of like, if I play this guy, if I play Baker and I lose, is this guy going to fire me? Or if I don't? So there's some of that. I think it comes back to the plan. I think there's a scene in Hard Knocks that you have to have a plan for every player. And when Hugh goes up to Baker in a kind of a passive-aggressive way and says, well, what time do you get in the morning? Like that tells you as a fan and as an executive that the kid hasn't been told what he needs to do. There's no plan for him. So I think there has to be a plan. Like, here's Baker, you're the starter. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to run this offense because 3 years from now, we're going to be really good and you're going to be the starting quarterback. Look, Tom Landry did this with the Dallas Cowboys. He wanted to play the flex. And at that point in the NFL, nobody was playing the flex defense. And so his team was running the flex. And everybody was saying, we can't run the flex. We're not any good. And Landry would always say to people, when we get good, the flex will be good. We need to learn how to run it right now. And I think that's the perfect example for young quarterbacks, especially Baker Mayfield. Let's play him. Look, I love Tyrod Taylor. There's no coach that has coached Tyrod Taylor that hasn't loved him in terms of his person and his demeanor and his work ethics. Those are all good things and all good role models for Baker Mayfield. However, that being said, the future of the Browns really lies with Baker Mayfield.
Well, I mean, they drafted him first overall. And by the way, it's apparently Tyrod. He's never referred to himself around you as Tyrod?
No, look, I am the worst.
What it is right now.
One of the things in the books, I'm so bad at names. We nicknamed everybody because I was so bad at pronouncing names. So I just nicknamed everybody. The heck with it.
I want to dive a little deeper. So you see on Hard Knocks that Hugh Jackson goes up to Baker and asks him what time that he's in a passive-aggressive way, meaning that I'm telling you right now, you're not in early enough. Like, right. I'm not seeing first in, last out of you, Baker Mayfield.
Right.
It means that Hugh Jackson and the Browns have not told Baker. Like, isn't that an issue that if you have to tell somebody you need to be first in, last out? I mean,
I think these kids need to learn how to be pros, right? Somebody's got to teach them.
So why isn't Tyrod or Drew Stanton doing it? I mean,
that's not his job. I think. Look. I think the job comes from the leader of the organization. The leader sets the culture. They all talk about we're got to change the culture here in Cleveland. I think the leadership of the team, the head coach, is responsible for the culture. I mean, every day Belichick walks into the office, he's about maintaining that culture. We all talk about the Patriot culture. Well, that just isn't in the building. It just isn't in the walls. It's developed and maintained every single day. And when it's not, things start to slip, and it comes back to it. So I think you need to be direct with players. Need to know exactly what you expect from them. They want truth and honesty. Look, every time I ever had to release a player, I wasn't going to sit there and say, well, I thought you were a good player, but the coaches didn't like you. The players respect honesty. Just be a man. Be honest. Look, you get in here 6 o'clock every morning. I mean, that conversation, had that been in New England, it would have been a little different. It would have been, Baker, you're probably going to run third team today until you start getting in, like your job is accountable for your actions. That's how I see it.
Michael Lombardi here on the Rich Eisen Show. I'm going to take a 60-second break, come back. I want to hear some names of players you think you're going to take a great leap from year one to year two, or just from the draft to year one. Which teams you particularly like this year, and then a couple of stories about Walsh and Al Davis, your favorites from Gridiron Genius, that again is available for pre-order where books are sold right now. Back with Michael Lombardi in 60 seconds. That was quite a throw by Patrick Mahomes over the weekend. Michael Lombardi, that kid's got an arm, and he's got, I'll say it, and I know that this is the highest praise you can give somebody, a Rodgers-type ability to uncork a throw on the run that you don't think he could throw from the angle that he's got or from his body positioning.
In basketball, they evaluate players if they can shoot off 1 foot and they can make shots like that. That's really critical in the NBA. And in football, it's critical to be able to throw the ball from any position of your body and make an accurate throw. Some guys can and some guys can't. Mahomes obviously can. I think the fascinating thing about the Chiefs, just watching them in the first 2 preseason games, is they're sitting on an offense that we don't know yet. I mean, Andy Reid is hiding a lot of things.
What do you mean?
Well, he's coming out with his typical last year's offense, but he knows Mahomes. Last year, when Alex Smith came to the line of scrimmage, he had a lot of things he had to get done in 20 seconds. He had to change the mic. He had to put the protection on. They were always in 2 plays. He had to get him in the right play, change the cadence. It was a lot of things going on. That's not going to be Mahomes' game. Mahomes' game is going to come down to going to make explosive plays down the field. And so I think what you're going to see from Andy is a little shift in what he's doing, and he's got enough skill players to allow him to make it the game easier for Mahomes to read it and understand where he's going with the football.
So the Chiefs are going to have a great offensive year, you believe?
I think if their protection and their offensive line can hold up.
Well, that's usually what they have, right? Isn't that the forte of the team?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first preseason game, they struggled, but I think this game was much better against Atlanta. Look, Andy's a really good quarterback coach. What Andy was able to do, if you watch Andy in Philadelphia with Donovan McNabb, a lot of play action, a lot of what we call cross boot, where he would really fake it and set up McNabb behind the tackle, not behind the quarterback, so he could high-low read it and make it easier for him. Andy was very good. Same thing he did with Alex Smith. He did things for Alex Smith that were tailored for what he could do, and I think he'll do the same thing for Mahomes. I think, and I said this to you in the back room, Rich, we're in a period of time in the NFL that's really, it's quietly getting unnoticed. We are in a period of having some incredible quarterback play. From maybe it's going to be Mahomes, but I know it's going to be Deshaun Watson, and I know it's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. It's going to be probably Derek Carr. He's going to be able to do some things. So there's so many great young quarterbacks. I think the league isn't talking about it enough. We're talking about too many other things.
Bortles? You include Bortles in that?
My favorite subject, Blake.
Boy, you really, you both barreled that kid, and he's...
I think the endowment effect's there. The endowment effect in business is when you have so much invested in a player, you don't see the other side.
Right.
And I think that, look, Blake took them to a first half against New England that was really good. And then the second half, they couldn't really finish the game off. And they're all in on Blake. But if I keep looking, if they had Deshaun Watson in Jacksonville, what would you say? Put some names in Jacksonville and ask yourself that question. How good would they be?
Well, what about Bridgewater, who may be available in the next couple of weeks? What do you think the Jets are going to do there?
Well, I think the Jets have to sit there and listen to every offer they can. They have to start Sam Darnold. They drafted Sam Darnold to be their franchise player. We talked about that in the last segment. So I think Bridgewater, to me, if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and you know that Jameis Winston is in a contract year, you know that Ryan Fitzpatrick's the backup quarterback, wouldn't it behoove you to trade a second-round pick? Because people often get confused. If I trade you a 2 for a player, I'm not giving you something that I'm not getting. I'm getting a player back, right?
Right.
If I'm getting a starting caliber quarterback who won 11 games in 2015, averaged 7.3 yards per attempt, had 4 comeback victories in his career. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater has proven that he's back to being 15 form. He's out there, he's moving around, he's throwing the ball accurately. He's done the things that he's had to do to prove to the NFL that he hasn't lost anything from 15 to now.
Would you, if you're Jacksonville? I know
I would if I was Jacksonville, but Jacksonville's never going to do it because of the endowment effect. They believe in they have so much invested in Blake that they can't see the other side, and I think it's going to be their Achilles heel.
Who else should go for Bridgewater, you think?
How about Denver? We saw Case Keenum right now. I don't know where they are with Case Keenum. They hired, and we know Paxton Lynch hasn't played well.
He got booed over the weekend.
I think Chad Kelly has played really well. I think he has a chance to be a really good NFL player, young back, maybe perhaps a backup starter. So, how about the New York Giants? Pat Shurmur knows Teddy Bridgewater really well. Eli Manning's towards the end. I mean, look, the Giants are going to take a lot of heat if Darnold is as good as everybody suspects. Even if Barkley.
That
conversation.
I agree that Darnold's blossoming in the building, right in their front porch, might put some pressure on. I think Barkley's going to take some.
I think Barkley's going to be great, but it comes down to the
incredible
conversation: do we take a quarterback or we take a running back? I think, and that's going to be the thing. You got to figure out if they can transition from Eli to another player without having any downtime, then they won't take that heat. But if they can't, they will.
Michael Lombardi, host of. Great pod that you can check out on Apple and all the other place where podcasts are available, and then Gridiron Genius, Michael Lombardi here, book that's available for pre-order. Who do you think is going to take a big leap this year?
I think Deshaun Watson and Jimmy Garoppolo, that game was really fun to watch. I think they're going to take a huge leap. Houston's a sleeping giant because they get all their defensive players back.
Right.
And they get their starting quarterback back. And they have all these weapons on offense. I think Houston's good. I mean, that AFC South, I know this, Jacksonville's really good on defense. Their offense, Doug Marrone does a great job of managing his team around what the quarterback can and can't do. And so you got Jacksonville. You got Tennessee was a playoff team last year. And then you got Andrew Luck back at Indianapolis. They play inside in a dome. That makes them a better team right there. And so that division is really good. And so Indianapolis can take a giant step forward. Look, John Gruden as a head coach comes into a team that if he gets it organized and cleared up, they have the 25th easiest schedule in the NFL going into the season. I think the sky's the limit there, too. They're going to be much improved from where they were.
So if I had to give you a shot at Super Bowl prediction, what do you got for me?
I like Houston. I love Houston. I love Houston's team. I love Deshaun Watson. I've loved Deshaun Watson, since he was at Clemson. And Dabo Sweeney naming him Michael Jordan. I think that kid's going to be great, and I think he's going to continue to make that team great. And that team's culture is built around this kid's attitude. I think they're going to be a tough out for a lot of teams.
What do you got for me in the NFC?
That's the wild card. There's so many good teams in the NFC. I love Mike Zimmer's Minnesota Vikings. I think they play in such a way. But I think the Green Bay Packers, they did not look good on defense last week. And so Mike Pettine's got a challenge ahead of him.
Although that kid Josh Jackson looks like the real deal, though.
But they get better. But they get the best player, one of the best players in the league coming back.
Me too.
Whenever you add him back to your roster, So, I think Green Bay, Houston, I think it's going to be a fun. That's what I'm saying. I think we're missing how great the league is right now. Aaron Rodgers is back. We got Aaron Rodgers back. Big Ben's, still playing well in Pittsburgh. And so
I like Atlanta, Lombo. I like the way that young defense buzzes around.
Look, Atlanta,
Calvin Ridley being added to this offense with Sanu and with Julio Jones in the backfield. And
Atlanta's had two ends of their offseason. The Super Bowl that they lost 51.
Mm-hmm.
And then last year, 1st and goal at the 9 with 1:14 to go in the game, and they can win the game. I mean, though that Atlanta's this close from basically knocking off the Super Bowl champion and winning a Super Bowl. The play calling down there at 1st and goal at the 9 will always haunt me. I just don't understand it. You throw an alley-oop in the end zone. Philly has one timeout left to go in the game. If you run the ball there, Philly has to.
But you might be hitting their Achilles heel, which is Sarkisian coordinating this offense.
And that's what
Mike.
that was where I was leading you as you were endorsing them. I think they've got to prove that they can manage games correctly and their offense. Look, nobody was going to make Matt Ryan as good as Kyle Shanahan did. There was going to be a down. Matt Ryan had to come down. He had to come back to his normal. He's still a great player, but he had to come back normally. I think that there lies the answer. Can they do that again? And I think that Atlanta, Atlanta, New Orleans is still a good team. I mean, they're come back. There's so many good teams in the NFC. Where the AFC, it's a little bit misleading. That South is good, but then you got, Buffalo's struggling, Miami's struggling to kind of come back. There'll be young players, the Jets. So I think, and we haven't even talked about New England.
You know what? Because it's basically Brady going to remake what we think of 41-year-old quarterbacks, which is.
It's remarkable.
He's gonna set a standard, and then the question is how many wins do they have to the point with what's their seeding, and who's going to have the ability to go into New England and knock them off, or who is going to have a great season, no matter how great Houston's going to be, when they stare down Tom Brady in their building, where he likes to win Super Bowls, plural. Will they be able to beat him in their building, or go to New England like they have to go in Week 1? And knock them off. That's a huge Week 1 game. If you're talking about how great Houston can be this year, that is just absolutely a monster Week 1 game in 3 weeks from yesterday.
Yeah, I think what we see from New England in Week 2 of this preseason was their defensive speed got better, which is they're going to have to be to play a team like Houston, which can spread you horizontally and attack you vertically. And I think that's what's going to be the Achilles heel of New England. Do they have enough team speed to do that?
Okay, couple minutes. Let's talk about your book, Gridiron Genius. What's your favorite wall story that's in here? I know I'm asking you
it's
about
funny.
one out of a million things, but
my favorite one was I got to drive. I equated it to James Corden's carpool karaoke. I got to drive him around, and I would drive him somewhere. And one day he asked me a question. He said, "Do you know who Tom Peters is?" And I said, and I'm thinking, God, he's playing a trick question on me here. This must be some punter from South Dakota State. And I said, I have no idea who Tom Peters is, Coach. And he said, he's the management guru. You need to read about Tom Peters. You need to read his book, In Search of Excellence with Bob Waterman, and learn from him. Because if you want to be a great executive or a great coach in this league, you have to take these ideas. And he loved Tom Peters. He loved them. And so that's what I did. I couldn't order it on Amazon. I literally had to go to a bookstore and find it, but I did.
Sure.
But, Walsh, there's so much the 86 draft was probably my finest moment in the NFL, just watching a man work under pressure, make quick decisions, and have a Hall of Fame draft. I mean, we're sitting there at the 19th pick in the first round, Rich, and he tells me to go to the chalkboard. And this is chalkboard time now. It's not grease board. Go to the chalkboard and write these 3 names down. He said, write Gerald Robinson, defensive end, Auburn. John L. Williams, running back, Florida. Ronnie Harmon, running back, Iowa. And he said, when it's our time to pick, we'll take one of those 3 guys. Well, the next pick, Minnesota takes Robinson. The next pick, Seattle takes Williams. The next pick, Buffalo takes Harmon. We're out. Now we're going to pick Larry Roberts, the defensive tackle from Alabama, Dothan High School. We're going to pick him, but it's way too early to pick him. So we trade back with Dallas and buy basically a half hour. The next thing you know, we're trading back. We trade a pick in the second round for next year's one, and we end up with Larry Roberts, Tom Rathman, Tim McKyer, John Taylor, Steve Wallace, Kevin Fagan, and the great Charles Haley. Oh, by the way, the great Charles Haley. And then in the 5th round, he gets mad. The director of college scouting, Tony Rosano, the man who hired me, tremendous man, says to Bill, we have to pick Patrick Miller from Florida. It will save our draft. And Bill looks at me and says, what do you think? And I said, Coach, he tested positive at the combine for marijuana. Now, this is 1986. There was no legalized of marijuana anywhere in the country at that point. So that was a really huge scar back in 86. And so Bill was indifferent to the idea, but he acquiesced to it. And so we picked him in the 5th round. And I can still see him. He slides his chair over and he goes to the free agent board. He goes to the free safety board and he looks at the board and he spends maybe about 2 or 3 minutes and he points to this card. He says, "Michael, do you know who this kid is here?" And I said, "Oh, you mean Don Griffin from Middle Tennessee State?" I said, "Yeah, coach. He played free safety. He's the Ohio Valley Conference Player of the Year." He said, "Well, when we pick in the 6th round, we're going to pick him." Great. So now this is April, right? So there's no internet. There's nothing. So Neil Schmidt, the area scout for the 49ers, saw him September the 21st. I think Ernie Plank saw him September the 29th. We don't know this kid could not be on the planet Earth at this point. So I rush back to get him, and I call him on the phone and said, "Don," and I could hear everybody in the audience talking. And yeah, I'm good. I'm healthy. Everything's good. Okay, we're going to pick you if I are picking the 6th round. So we pick him. He ends up, Bill meets him and says, "Let's just put him at corner, see if he can play corner." Well, we hit in that draft room. And this is Bradford Dillman, the old TV actor, was a draft guru. He loved the draft. And he was a huge 49er fan. So Bill let him come in the draft room. And this is when we had 12 rounds. So the draft started at 5 in the morning Pacific time, and it would go till 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, it went all day. And Bradford would stay in there the whole time. So in this draft, we had so many picks. We picked so many players that Bill announced after we picked Don Griffin, he said, "Look, Bradford, you've got the next pick in the 10th round. It's your pick." And Bradford was just as cool and calm as can be, open up his briefcase and he hands out a piece of paper and the guy that he picks, he wants to pick Harold Hallman, defensive tackle from Auburn. And he has a complete write-up about him, and he says he gets more penetration than Warren Beatty at a sorority party.
Oh my God.
And so he writes that in there. I can still remember the line. And so he says it, and so we draft him. And he goes to Canada and makes makes All-American in Canada all those years.
Gridiron Genius. That's just one of the stories.
That's just one of them.
Available for pre-order right now where books are sold. Lombo, thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you, Rich. Thanks for
having me.
having me.
Hope to have you back real soon.
Thank you.
You got it.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.